Hey everybody, Chi Eddie here. Recently, the Caliber Collective had the opportunity to interview Drew, the lead developer and founder of Small Indie Company, a team currently developing We the People. We the People is set to be a PvPvE hardcore tactical shooter set in an alternate timeline of the Pacific Northwest of the United States in the year 2028. The game is still in the earlier stages of development, with a few successful tech demos and plans for future playtests in 2025. From the limited information we have received regarding the mechanics and gameplay loops surrounding We the People, we thought it was important to talk to Drew and see what his vision for this project was. And boy, is it an exciting one. While listening to this interview that we are about to get into, I want you to pay attention to the passion and strong direction that this game has. All too often, we see games lose their identity within the development process, and I do not see this being an issue here. But anyways, let's get to the interview. Well, a little bit about us before we get started. We both come from the same community, the Caliber Collective. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all.
I've just heard about it through show, so.
Okay. Yeah, so we're just a collection of FPS gamers. A lot of us typically stick to milsims and survivals and stuff like that. We just launched a creator program. So we got a lot of things in the works in the future, and We the People was one of the projects that kind of caught our eye that we wanted to know a little bit more about. So we definitely appreciate you allowing us to go forward with this interview process.
Yeah, happy to chat.
So, just to get started, can you tell us a little bit more about like Small Indie Company and how you guys got started and how you guys all met each other?
Yeah, sure. So start off as a solo dev. Obviously, had a couple ideas of my own over the course of the last few years, and decided to just you know work towards trying to create to the best of my ability. I think I come from a very interesting background that is not related to game dev, but certainly has some connection to creativity and living within that creativity. So for me, that's been a big focus of mine, is like, what can I do that kind of scratches that itch a little bit? And much like I'm sure most people, probably your guys selves as well, you might find yourselves acting a bit critical of games, almost as if we're all critics these days. And man, there's no real eloquent way to say it other than like, I hated that part about myself, was like I would play all these games, especially, indie titles or survival games or anything in this particular genre over the last 10 years. And I would find myself very critical. And again, I feel like to some extent it was worth it to me to like kind of kill that part of myself and just, hey, if I don't like what everyone else is providing, let me go try to make my own thing and put my time and my effort and my money where my mouth is.
Are you somebody that's like you're more critical of yourself? Because I'm that way, where like everything I do, I feel like is not good. I need outside feedback to tell me it is.
um Yeah, maybe a little bit, to some extent. I also recognize, I try to look at things as balanced as I can. So I take the good with the bad, the highs with the lows. I try not to get too full of myself. I try not to get too down in the dumps. I just maintain an even keel, if you will. And I take feedback, again, good, bad, the ugly. That's kind of like our approach with everything, right? We're showing people our development process, and there are things that are not good, and there are things that are awesome. And so, especially when we put that tech demo out last June, we got to see that in real time. There are people who are like, "Holy shit, this UI sucks," and we're like, "Yeah, it really does. You're right." And so. With that, we get to make slight adjustments and things like that. And so, yeah, no, I don't. I tend not to get too far on one side or the other. I'm a very balanced person in that sense, and man, I could apply that to every aspect of my life. I try not to get too like show too much fervor or become a zealot for any one thing or another.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, with the feedback and stuff, I'm sure you guys have seen it as well. It's just the internet space in general is super negative. So how do you guys filter out people that are just on here to complain versus like critical good feedback? Is there a process that you guys have down for that?
Not really. Most of it's by the hip, shoot from the hip, and we've actually had like a ton of positive feedback up until this point. Very very few negative ones, and I think again you can kind of tell when someone is trying to provide uh, constructive criticism versus just like, bro, you guys suck. It's like, okay, well, you can't do much with that. So again, why let that really affect you too much? Whereas someone who's like, hey, this sucks because, and they give like a very thoughtful or insightful perspective on what it is. And again, it comes down to the approach, right? If someone is nuanced in their criticism, how could you not process that and consider it? And if there's truth to it, take it for the better.
Awesome, awesome. So I know with like a lot of games in early development, there are things that the FPS community wants to see. So there's a lot of voices, a lot of good idea fairies. Are you guys gonna stay true to your guns on what your overall vision for the game is, or is this something that you think could possibly be shaped by people's feedback or questions or things they want to see in the FPS genre?
Sure. Yeah. Generally in our first devlog, I mean, we say we literally want people to come on the journey with us and give us their feedback, and we will try to definitely shape the project based on a lot of that feedback. But the reality is we have a core concept. Very early on, we wrote a GDD for the game, and we certainly can't stray too far from that because now that's essentially antithetical to what it is we're trying to do, right? We can't make a game and pivot at every freaking step, but to some extent, we are certainly open to critiques, criticisms, and also very thoughtful feedback too. And as much as we can incorporate it, we will. I think one of the most recent things was someone went into depth describing why they felt we should. Adjust the way we deliver our mouse sensitivity. They said incorporating it with 4 decimal places, an example of that being 0.0125, would allow for a better mouse feel as it relates to certain mouses and their DPI settings and things like that. And so again, coming from like a solo dev, now us running like a team of people, nothing I would have ever considered until again someone very thoughtfully brought it up, and now I'm like, okay, yeah, tracking that. Let's see what we can do, and um, just small things like that are certainly worth changing. Our UI, one of them was mouse sensitivity. Inherently, in our first tech demo back in June, we did not have the ability to change mouse sensitivity, let alone change the pitch and yaw or whatever. There's still those old school boomer shooter gamers that really like having their mouse going in different kooky ways. And hey, you got to respect it. Everyone's a little different. So small things like that are so easy to listen to and consider. And if someone says like, "Hey, make it a BR," I'm gonna say,
Sorry for the cough,
no,
boys.
right?
If you're watching this,
But
Yeah.
I will
forgot
definitely
I
be
had the
open
mic hot.
and consider it. Yeah, why not?
Awesome. For the current formula of the game, from what I can see and what I understand, is that you guys are making like maps to kind of go into, loot from, and exfil from. Is that true, or is it more open world? Because there was some confusion there between some of our community members.
Sure. Yeah. And that easily could have been a confusion on our end just due to early marketing and things like that. To be fair, just for context, early on, when we made the switch from 4.27 to 5.0.3, at the time it might have even been 5.0.1, just an early UE5 build, we really wanted it to be an open world game. It was actually intended on being a first person and third person shooter, right? We were heavily influenced by games like Infestation, Survivor Stories. All of us absolutely despise the development side of that and the people kind of in charge of that. But again, instead of kind of crying about it, why not kind of make our own take on it? And so, as a solo dev at that time, that was my thought process, and we wanted an open world. But then we found, due to limitations in the engine at the time, brand new engine UE5, so exciting, but we found that when we strayed too far from world origin, you'd find that the gun would shake or shudder, like stutter around, and kind of, it was just very unbecoming of a first-person shooter, and it looked ridiculous. And so we had to scale back, and we started thinking more about like how can we break it into maps of 2 by 2 kilometers squared, and thankfully since Unreal 5.4, they have since fixed that. And we now are no longer limited to any map size in particular. And so we have the complete freedom to do what it is we want, including make many maps. I think our goal is to launch with 5 maps into early access, and really seeing how we can hit that goal is going to be the challenge. And earlier I mentioned a job posting. It's for that very reason, right? And so ideally we will find ourselves with a lot larger maps compared to some of the more traditional, especially compared to something like Tarkov. In some cases it might be about the same size, in other cases it might be bigger. In more of our arena setting, you can certainly expect they're smaller. So you'll definitely get a myriad of options, and it's definitely going to be extract, infill, exfil, right? It's not going to be this big open world, and it's certainly not, similar to Tarkov or other projects where you're kind of going from one map to another. You're definitely doing the loop of infilling, exfilling, maybe akin to like the Cycle Frontier or Tarkov.
I like the sound of that though. I mean, that does sound pretty promising. What are you guys calling the I'm gonna call it a hideout, but I don't know what name you have for it. We've
Mhm.
seen it in some of the clips where you're walking up to the mission board and you're infilling from the mission board. What are you calling that area? Is that the hideout?
Yeah, so it's changed over time, and you kind of asked like how willing we are to change certain things, and this was one we definitely felt pivoting on was worthwhile. We don't want to be like Tarkov, where you have this hideout and it's instanced specifically to you and you alone. At first, that was very much part of our design and our intention, and even in the first devlog, I talk about that. But I think we've changed a little bit, and after watching a game like say Gray Zone Warfare, and this is not to throw shade, but we felt as though their safe zone settlement was man, it was just kind of pointless. Other than the badass viewpoint of seeing helos coming in and going out. Other than the fact that you couldn't hear your friends now, in comms or whatever, but. For us, the point of a safe zone settlement is very important, and I think in Show's last interview with me, he had asked like, "What about some downtime? What do you guys have planned?" And so, I probably won't go into the craziest detail there, but I will say that we do have downtime stuff planned for the safe zone settlement, and considering a player will spend a lot of time there, especially all of their downtime. In our case, there's no main menu simulator activities. It's like when you're not in a raid or in an arena match, you're hanging out there and you're dealing with multiple forms of progression. Again, I won't go into too much detail, but we are taking influence from some rather new and interesting titles, and stuff that maybe people aren't quite ready for in this genre. So we're excited to set ourselves apart in that sense.
Now, is that going to be something that players can kind of group up in and all contribute together to some sort of settlement?
Perhaps.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to put you on the hook to answer any questions you don't want to. Um, Another question that we had or I had was obviously there's going to be risk whenever you infill into one of the maps in the
Sure.
world.
Right.
Do you guys have plans for higher risk maps that have higher rewards in them? Or is everything just kind of dangerous everywhere that you go? And then there's some POIs that are obviously you don't want to step into lightly or under geared.
Right, right. No, that's a good question. I would say you can definitely expect that certain maps will be harder than others inherently, just by virtue of the way you're required to traverse through them. You can also find that certain maps might have POIs that are specific to a particular faction, and so some of those factions just might be more challenging compared to others, right? We really want to have smart AI to the point where, you know, if you're facing a PMC group, for example, not in the sense of Tarkov, but an AI PMC group, some of them might be employing tactics that are a bit more advanced than the average scav. And so, in that sense, points of interests will definitely be a way to gauge difficulty and challenge. But yeah, I'm sure you could expect that certain maps would be harder to interface with, and maybe as a result, and consequently have better tier loot as a result. And for example, just a little tease, we got a map we're working on called Terminal, and as you would expect, a very large open airfield, very like reminiscent of say Arma or DayZ. We might try to make some of the more challenging loot to acquire in some precarious places, right? We've shown off air control towers and things like that in the past in some of our devlogs, and you can expect that running across a big airfield might be kind of spooky.
Interesting. Okay. I like the sound of that. I mean, you're hitting all the right marks on that one for sure. How much freedom do you want your player base to have within the world of We the People? Is this something that you want the maps to be, they have freedom within the map, but it is kind of more a linear, like you infill, you
Mhm.
loot, you do your objectives and you get out? Or do you want there to be kind of a story that's told within every raid?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy this idea of organic gameplay. I think making your own kind of story that's very fun and enjoyable. It's why we provide people the ability to have proximity chat. Just depending on how they want to act or react to other players' actions, should absolutely be in their hands. But is it as linear as a Dark Souls level or map? Probably not, right? Is it as open as DayZ? Likely not as well. And so the freedom, I would say, is look at a Tarkov map, whatever their largest maps may be. How much freedom do you have to go from one point of interest to another, or pivot and go to a different place entirely? I think in that sense you have the ultimate freedom within the boundaries of a level. But how you interface with the world, other players, things like that is ultimately up to you.
Awesome. And then you kind of mentioned arena maps
Yeah,
previously, like one question
sure.
back. Do you want to speak on perhaps the difference between the arena gameplay and the regular gameplay? Or are
Yeah,
they kind of intertwined?
no, I would say they're very different in a sense. One is certainly a different pacing, right? Very clearly, extract is especially with our removal of maybe the more traditional 45-minute map board timer. We're looking more at like the Cycle Frontier, where a player could be in for a while if they want to be. And to that point, the pacing will be infinitely different than say an arena where your round length is considerably shorter. The pacing of a match might be considerably shorter compared to an extract mode. Yeah, I would say we probably won't be going down the route of something like say EFT in their arena. We're probably going to be leaning closer to something like Counter Strike.
That's pretty cool. I'm definitely a fan of Counter Strike. Are the two characters, or is it one character? Is progression going to be the same on both? Are you going to be progressing the same character when you play arena versus regular?
No, I think we actually have seen in real time how that didn't work out for EFT.
I,
What's
I would
what's
agree. That was why that was one of my questions for that.
Right. Yeah, and we pay a lot of attention to other games, especially competitors, but more importantly, as fans of the genre, we really try to keep an open eye, keep an open mind and an eye on things that are moving the genre forward or hindering it. And so we think genuinely this idea of this connected arena and extract could work if done well, if implemented appropriately. But we've kind of yet to see that. And if anything, we find that it becomes a detriment to the wipe longevity. And so for us, a lot of the methodologies and progression systems we're looking to bring to We the People, especially as it differentiates itself from a game like EFT or ABI or Delta Force or anything out there, Hunt Showdown, etc. We care a lot about wipe longevity. And to get back on track with Arena, that is, not only are they not connected, really they serve two very different purposes. But our goal is to launch with both available. We're not going to wait 6 years to put it out. We want it out immediately. And as you would expect with a game looking to compete with some of these titans in the genre, we have to launch with enough content to satiate that broader player base, and not just in a way that's familiar, but in a way that's familiar and an improvement on the genre inherently. So when it comes to Arena specifically, again, you'll find that there will be benefits to engaging in that sort of content, not just from like warming up, preparing to go deploy in with a bunch of sweats, and that's a perfect opportunity to do that. But if you're a fan of that competitive, more ranked or even unranked gameplay, you would get to engage in that as well. And again, as it ties in and relates to wipes, we have a lot of fun stuff in store. And then as I've previously mentioned with our first devlog, we also have the intention to allow for our kind of gulag style duels. So if you're in the safe zone settlement, and I've said this and I'll say it again, if someone just won't stop talking shit, you could play for pink slips, right?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go settle in an arena.
Right, exactly. So we take a lot of influence from like OSRS in that sense.
Okay. One other question that I had, this is more of a personal one.
Sure.
As you guys create the world for We the People, we obviously know that it's set in 2028 Pacific Northwest America. And you guys are writing the lore for this game. Is there one piece of lore that you think is really cool that you would like to share with your fan base?
Yeah, I mean,
One piece of lore. Oh, sorry.
no, you're good. We recently posted about it on Twitter. We were talking about our one of our kind of newer maps called Nuclear, and I think the Pacific Northwest has a very rich history when it comes to nuclear related activities. I'm sure a lot of people saw an interface with Oppenheimer last year, and it might have even been early this year. My life is a blur, so it's hard to tell. I don't engage in any fun or free time. But the people who did watch it certainly got a kick out of it. And again, there's a lot of historical reference to the creation of the atomic bomb, and so what people don't realize is there's a lot of history in Washington about that specifically. There's a reactor site B in Washington where it essentially was a plutonium creation plant, and it was along a very particular river for water cooling purposes. And there's a lot of history and lore, and players might just see that there's like a lot of interesting history connected to what we're trying to do. We definitely want to bring in, realism and immersion in our game. And when we sacrifice those two things, it's in the name of authenticity. And I think there's nothing more authentic than bringing in real world environments and real world history, and obviously deviating from it where we see fit, and what we deem to be beneficial in the lore and the story for the world we're building.
That was kind of my next question as well. Was are you guys facing any challenges, or do you think it is challenging to create a world that exists, that is out there, that isn't completely unique? Like the Pacific Northwest is there, so obviously you're going to have players within your fan base that either live there or have experienced it. Are you guys finding it difficult at all to remain true to that setting?
Um, Not really. I think actually most of the feedback we've received, especially from PNW natives, is that like when I put out a thing about port, someone will come back and say, "Dude, I've been there. I know that location." And why is that? That's because we based it on a real world location, quite literally. We have
That's so cool.
the best reference in the world is the real world, and so what we like doing is looking up the most iconic places in Washington, and seeing what inspiration we can take from that. But again, because I live there at a certain point in time in my life, I was stationed there for a little bit. I can pull from that, and I can think about very particular places I have been and I've seen and I've experienced, and I can say, how sick would this be, to be a playable location? And luckily, the Pacific Northwest is already eerie as all hell. You got that rolling fog down the mountains in the morning, and it's just it's almost perfect. And so for me, when I was really considering where the heck this would take place, there was no other place for me. I wasn't going to make another Soviet style game. There's 1,001 of those, and they've done a great job at that too. And so for me, I really love that area. It ties back to a very pivotal and important time for me as a young man growing up in this world. And I think for me, I can kind of tie these two things together, and in what I feel is like a pretty impactful way, hopefully for the genre. And I think again, using something like Unreal 5, we're going to be um, harnessing some tech that I think will make our maps stand out and really have their own unique identity. And hopefully, at that point and to that extent, we'll be distancing ourselves from hey, this is the next Tarkov, because everybody knows being a Tarkov killer is a silly notion, and nobody can kill Tarkov but themselves, and nobody would want to, because Tarkov and BSG collectively are badasses. They're awesome. They provided essentially a new genre for everybody, and to that I've got nothing but respect and admiration. And when it comes to our environments, we don't want to be kind of copying them or anything like that. We want to really show off how beautiful the Pacific Northwest is, and in beauty there is pain at times, and believe me, we the people will bring some pain.
Awesome. Our last question, and then we had one more question for kind of off the books. The last question that our player base had was, will there be a clan system or some way for players to group together and progress together outside of just party and matchmaking? A lot of people want to continue their journeys as a group or start their journeys as a group. Is there going to be systems in place for that?
Yeah, so in the earliest iterations of my design for the game, I had, again, with every intention of it being kind of more open world, I had the intention of having clans, clan wars, all sorts of cool stuff like that. And of course, I would love to see how much of that original spirit and intention I can maintain. But again, it has to be within reason. It has to make sense. And again, when sacrificing immersion or realism, it's in the vein of authenticity. So if it provides some form of authenticity to our universe, to our gameplay loop, and to our player base, we'll certainly consider it, and we really do thoughtfully consider damn near everything we talk about adding.
Okay. Awesome. I really enjoyed everything that you had to say, and I can tell that you're super passionate about it. When you were talking about the fog rolling down the hills in the morning and how eerie that is, it painted a picture in my head
Yeah,
because
man,
I've been
that's
up there.
this is really good. I really like it, man, and especially the quoting of sacrificing realism and immersion for authenticity. I think that is a huge like quote for success right now, because there's a lot of, I wouldn't say copy and pasting, but there's a lot of kind of the same stuff, and like everybody, there's only
That's not unfair to say.
yeah,
Of course.
there's only so many ways you can make an M4, right? Like that's what
Of
an
course.
M4 looks like. You can't.
Right.
So how do you take what is real or what looks real, right, and make your own stamp of uniqueness, man? And I think you saying that quote 2 or 3 times during this is big. I respect that a lot.
Yeah, and you guys mentioned the fog rolling down hills. Obviously, to what it was I was saying, or a callback that is. Another thing I think, and this should maybe be a little tease as to what is to come. There's things that are inherent to the Pacific Northwest that are not inherent to other places. Every few hundred years, there's major floods that take over and devastate very particular locations. And so, how can we pull in real world inspiration and things like that? We intend to have a map called Flooded. Well, I'll let you guys do a little bit of, ideating on your own, but I'm sure you could put one and two together. So, definitely that. And when it comes to guns, we love, we personally enjoy firearms. We want to be as accurate as we can in what we're portraying, mainly for the sake of not necessarily being a sim, but again, like a certain level of respect to that community, the fan base, and to ourselves, right? We want ultimate customization and ultimate options. And I think even during our tech demo last June, there was a content creator who did the math, and he said, you guys have over 1 million variations of customization on just the one gun that was available, the M4. And you know, as I've mentioned in the Discord, we'll be having a playable ready for people come May through June at another Steam Fest, and they might find that there's a lot more guns available in this build than that build last June.
That gets
wait.
me really excited. Yeah, I can't either. I don't know about you, but this is definitely a project that I'm excited for. This is something that I think we need in this genre, and personally, we need more attitudes like Drew's in this industry. I think this is going to be something special. It excites me that they are not going to sacrifice authenticity or their vision for this project based on feedback. I think it is important when you're making a masterpiece that you sit back and you have a strong vision of what it's going to look like at the end before you even start. And to me, it sounds like Drew already has this done. If you want more information regarding We the People or even the Caliber Collective, the links of both Patreons and Discords will be in the description of this video. Until next time, folks.